Okay, took me a minute to figure out some logistical issues, so thanks for bearing with me. And now I'm going to share this on the page so that you can all see. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, let's see. I gotta find the link and I gotta share it and all these things. Okay. All right, someone found their way here. That's good. That's a start. It's my first time doing this not on my regular page, and it's important to me to get you all on here. Okay. All right, cool. Baruch, you found me. That's awesome. And there's 4 people here now. I shared it on my page. I just need to share it in the group. And then we are good to get going. And one day I'm going to have all my tech really down pat. Okay. And what was the last thing I had to do? All right, that might be it for now. We had some people who wanted to join the group. That's what I had to do. All right. So, welcome everybody. It's a pretty crazy time. I'm not gonna lie. It's we've all been in this moment for 4 or 5 weeks by now. We've been in this moment of isolation. We've been in this moment of total upheaval of our lives. Some of us have had to, quickly rush back from one country to the other. Some of us have had to go and spend time with family. Some of us are indefinitely in different places. Some of us have lost our work. Some of us have lost loved ones. We're in a scenario right now where everything is in all kinds of places. So yes, it's also Pesach, and normally at this time on Pesach, there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about liberation, and there's a lot to talk about what does it mean for me to experience freedom in myself and in my life and in the world. There's so much to talk about what is the freedom that we see for the world, and this time we're experiencing all of that with an additional layer of what the hell is going on. What's going on in the world, what's going on in our communities on a very micro level, and what's going on in the world around us. And it's being at such an interesting time, at this time of literally Pesach, liberation, focus on freedom. It's a time for us to think, how does all of this massive body of teachings, the teachings of, just the story of the Exodus. I have here Chumash Parshat Shemot. Looks just like the one that I studied in 7th grade. It's very exciting. How do I relate that whole body of work, all of those ancient stories that have been passed down to us for a reason, relate to the process we're going through right now? It's a common discussion in rabbinic Jewish studies that the Exodus from Egypt was a prototype. It was a first time around with the intention of creating a pattern, a methodology for how do we get out of boundaries? How do we get out of exile? How do we get out of oppression in future? We can talk about, like, on a mystical level, was that supposed to be an ultimate redemption? End of the day, it wasn't. We have our ancestors, Israelite slaves. They were in a scenario of oppression. Something happened. A lot of things happened that got them out of oppression. And then since then, we've unfortunately, tragically, found ourselves back in moments of oppression. And how do we use this map of the Exodus of Yetzias Mitzrayim to show us what we can possibly do for our own exodus. And every year, normally when I'd be talking about this, we would just be talking about like the usual, like, yeah, how do I get out of my addictions? How do I get out of my things that hold me back? How do I deal with the fact that I'm afraid of public speaking, or that I am afraid to ask for promotion at work, or that I'm, afraid to go on a date or to leave a bad relationship, or all of the different things that we sort of deal with in our daily life. And now we're facing a much, much greater situation of constraint, of Mitzrayim. In Hebrew, Mitzrayim, which is Egypt, isn't just the country or the empire. It literally means Meitzar. It means narrow place of constriction. So we had a week ago, the Seder night, we focused on the moment of the Exodus. We focused on that night when all the Israelites are sitting in their homes and they have their sticks in one hand and they have their belts tied in another, and they're ready to go, and they're preparing matzah for their journey, and they're, having this amazing spring sacrifice, this Pesach lamb, and they're putting blood on their doorposts, and they're preparing themselves for this ultimate moment of freedom. And when we have the plagues that are running in the background, and it really felt very resonant with what we're experiencing right now. We're in our homes, we're locked down. I really kind of wish you could see this thing behind me. All right, it's a beautiful picture of the Kotel. We're in this moment where we don't have our physical freedom. We're in a moment where we're locked in our homes, being told not to go anywhere. There's a plague ravaging outside. It feels kind of resonant. But what's happening in the second part of Pesach? So tomorrow night is the 7th night of Pesach, and that is the night that we commemorate the crossing of the sea. So if you're in ancient Israel, it's actually, the dates are the same as this. It was a Thursday when they went out, and they traveled in the desert for several days. And when they got to the sea, that was 7 days later. That's how long it took them to travel to the Red Sea, the Reed Sea, Yam Suf. And there they were faced with one of the scariest moments, probably the scariest moment, where they were faced with a sea, and they had Egyptians behind them chasing after them. The Midrash tells us, the rabbis say, that there were wild animals that had come in on the sides. All right, Bluth wants to get to the tambourines. Go, we get into the tambourines. Don't worry, we're going to talk a lot about tambourines. In fact, I have one. I actually have multiple, but this is the one that I have right here. Oh, I have my other one over there. We'll get to the tambourines, but, first we got to figure out how to get across to the other side. So, you're facing a wall of water, and what are you going to do? It's about a leap of faith. And the Midrash tells us that it was, somebody called Nachshon, who was one of the let's say, princes, one of the leaders of one of the tribes, and he stepped forward and said, you guys don't want to do this? You're scared? You want to go back? The thing about slavery is that we do want to go back to our oppression, and it's really interesting, actually. This is a bit of a tangent, but with what we're going through right now, where we're like, I would kill for my morning commute and for the long line to get coffee and for feeling frazzled and stressed, like I never have enough time at home with my family, or I never have enough time to just chill in my pajamas. Like I just wish that I had a moment to just like stop all of it. And we have that now, but we're like, take me back to slavery. So there's something about the moment of crossing the sea that is a shift, not just from, okay, we're out of Egypt, but a shift from the narrowness into the expandedness, into going into the wilderness, into going to the place where we do the work on ourselves. And one thing I've been hearing from a lot of different spiritual teachers during this time of coronavirus is that we're really living through a chrysalis process. We're living through, I love how in Hebrew the word is golem. It's the moment of being in the cocoon. It's the moment when everything disintegrates into mush. The caterpillar that gets into that cocoon thinks it's going to die. She really is totally certain that that's the end. It's dark. Her entire body breaks down, and that's the end. But what actually happens is that that's when we get to do work on ourselves. We get to sit with it. We get to process. And by the end of it, we come up with, I don't know if it's the answers, but we come up with the tools and the ability to step forward and to be that beautiful, beautiful butterfly that comes out of the cocoon. So it's a pretty important process, and it's not something that can be rushed. And I'm seeing from different healers that, people who are undergoing this illness, may they all be healed, are really going through that process of, the lungs and the throat being challenged and having to address the grief that rises in us, having to address that which we've been holding in our bodies for centuries, for millennia, and work through that. And unfortunately, the battle is tough, and it's a physical as well as a spiritual battle, and different people have different experiences of it. And that's the collective battle we're going through in the world right now. So when we look at crossing the sea, what happens when we actually get to the other side of the sea? What is that moment of openness and expansion? And what are some of the ways that we can actually see a similarity between the work that we're doing here and now, that we're seeing come up as the work that we need to be doing now, and the work of what happens, of what the transformation is when the Israelite people, Bnei Israel, get across the river. Okay, my glasses are causing a reflection, but I need it to read my notes, so I apologize. Okay, so I want us to talk about one of the most fascinating elements of the whole sea crossing, which is the moment when we get across the sea to the other side, and we have the most incredible moment where, hold on, let me grab the text. I was going to send out the text to all of you, but I'm not that technologically proficient. Actually, I can do this. I can send everybody the text by commenting on this video. So give me a second. I'm going to send you all the text if you want it. Absolutely no pressure. Oh, wow. Okay. So if you want to look at the text, it's here. So the minute that we get across the sea, what happens? It says, Vatikach Miriam Hanaviyah, and Miriam, Achot Aharon, and Miriam, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took et hatof biyada. The tof is some form of frame drum. Probably looked a little bit something like this. Maybe not as pretty and painted. V'teitzena et hatof biyada. She took the drum in her hand. V'teitzena kol hanashim achareha, and all the women followed after her. Batupim or b'macholot, with a tof, which is that kind of drum, and a machol, which is like a circle dance. Kind of like a hora, right? Jews still like to do that kind of thing. Vata'an lahem Miriam, and Miriam sort of call in response with them. Shiru la'Hashem ki ga'o ga'a, sing to God because God's greatness has triumphed. Sus v'rachva rama v'yam, the horse and its rider has been thrown into the sea. So it's a pretty awe-inspiring image of, imagine like throngs and throngs of women, beautiful women dressed in their, long robes, coming out through the desert, coming out through the water, and suddenly pulling out these drums. Now, I'm not in my current New York apartment, but I actually have a hand drum that I made myself several years ago. And hand drums are not an easy thing to make. It requires having a wooden frame and pulling a piece of wet skin, animal skin, over it, and then using a sinew to thread back and forth, thousands of times. I mean, it can take you, 10, 15 hours to do that process of tightening and tightening and tying the drum and tying the drum. And it's very tedious, and it requires a lot of patience. And for me personally, that was very challenging. I'm not the most hands-on sort of, slow and patient person. But preparing a drum is not an easy thing, and to imagine this massive group of women having these drums just ready along with whatever other basic necessities they took with them, and we hear that they came out of Egypt with rechush gadol, with great wealth, so they're coming out with all kinds of things. But why do they have these drums? And the Talmud tells us that the women had the drums because they had the foresight, they had the trust to say, you know what, we're going to get out of this mess. This is not the be-all and end-all. We grew up in slavery. We've only known this life, but that does not mean that it's the only life. And I'm going to refer a lot to one of my favorite sacred texts, in my opinion, which is the movie The Prince of Egypt. Now you can see it on the West End in the UK as well. And I just watched it last night, as is my custom to watch it at this time of year. I usually watch it once during the time period when we read this in the Torah, which is usually like back in January, and then I watch it again now. And Miriam is presented as an incredible character. We encounter her a few times. We encounter her the first time as the little girl who is with her mother Yocheved when she is sending the baby Moshe into the basket down the river. And we have this incredible moment where Miriam is looking at her little brother, and she's dealing with this like very complicated feeling of, you know, I'm five, like the Midrash tells us that she's 5 years old, and she is living in a life of child prophecy. She is a vision. The Talmud tells us that Miriam was the one who encouraged her parents to get back together. At that point, the Israelite parents were done procreating. They said, if all of our children are being sentenced to death sentence, then what's the point of having kids? And she was like, no, you guys, you think you're going to prevent having any babies being born. Paro's decree was only against male children, and now you're getting rid of even potential female children. She got her parents back together. She sees this little baby being born. She has an intuition that most other children at that age do not have. She follows her brother down to the river. So that's our first image we have of Miriam, is that she's very related to the river, the flow of the river. She follows her brother. She watches through the reeds until he's collected from the water. The other two moments that we encounter Miriam throughout the Torah is, the second time is this moment that I just read to you, when she comes out of the sea and she's just leading the women in this incredible ecstatic song, and that's the sea. And the third time is we have this encounter with Miriam when she comes across and she's leading the people in the desert. Moshe's leading the people, and they're all camping in the desert. And there's a well. There's a mysterious well. It's called Be'er Miriam, the well of Miriam. And this well follows the people around from place to place. And we know that when Miriam passes away, there's a very intense mourning period, and then there's a very intense riot, because they're literally relying on her, because she's the carrier of the water. And Miriam, the name, if you look at it in Hebrew, it actually has the word mayim in it. And the word mayim, which means water, has the word yam in it, which is sea. So we know that Miriam is a person who is inextricably linked with water. She is the water priestess. She's the water prophetess. She's the one who leads the people across the sea, and then she brings them to singing across the sea. So there's a couple of things I want to think about when it comes to these different types of water. Miriam, as we see in, like I said, my favorite text, The Prince of Egypt, she holds the faith, and she convinces the people time and time again, we're going to get out of this mess. This is, women, make drums, have children, don't despair. This moment is not over. And she's doing this all through her power that's connected with water. So let's think a little bit about what water means and what water represents. It's very commonly known through most earth-based traditions, and it's interesting once you start to study Judaism and look at it in a more mystical way, that we have so much in parallel with other mystical traditions, and a lot of this is really aligned with ecofeminism, which we can talk about. And we know that there's lower waters and there's upper waters. So we have some sources of water like rain, or fountains that come from above to below. And we sort of see things that way in our life. We're always like, oh yeah, where am I going to get this from? It'll come from up here. God provide me, or, the sky, it'll go fall from the sky. We think about things that way a lot. That's sort of our human way of understanding things, is that things come from above down to below. But we also have the feminine waters, and the feminine waters are the rivers and the lakes and the wells and the seas. And these are the waters that rise from below upwards. That was Miriam's well. That was the river, the Nile River. We know that the Nile River used to sort of well up once a year and water all the surrounding tributaries, and that was how Egypt was so fertile. The same with the sea. So Miriam really embodied this representation of the whirling, mysterious depths, the ability to connect, to take something that's really, really powerful. It's rushing below the ground. It's water. It's um, it's deep and it's dark and it's mysterious and it can be gushing, but it needs to be channeled properly. In order to channel that water, and any ancient feminine mystic tradition will tell you, there needs to be a really strong connection to the earth. I see one of my Rebbes, Hallie, is here, and I know that you very much are engaged with this kind of Torah, and Bluth as well, and I can't see who else is on here, but I bless you all. And just that ability to hold tight with the earth and to be somebody who knows how to channel that water through, that was what Miriam did. And Miriam was so, her pioneering element came through not only with the work that she with water and with faith, but also in the song that she sang. So let's talk about a little bit about Miriam's song. Miriam's song is something that, if you understand a little bit about Hebrew grammar, and that's why if you want to look, I have a link over here, you can look at the text. It says, Vatikach Miriam, and then she says, Shiru laHashem kika oga'ah. In Hebrew grammar, that means, Shiru means sing to God. It's a present tense. It's a imperfect. No, sorry, it's not imperfect. Is it participle? It's a participle. I'm not good at this stuff. I've been learning this stuff, and I'm not good at naming them. But it's a moment of saying, this is what's happening now. Shiru laHashem, we're singing to God, because God is great. And she does this song, and actually, there's a Hasidic commentary that says that Vata'an Miriam, and Ta'an means like a call and response. So when you read it in the text, you think, oh, she's talking about the women. Miriam was kind of doing like a da 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 da, and they were like da 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 da. And this commentary says, actually, maybe this was the angels. Maybe Miriam was singing out, and the angels repeated after her because she preempted even the angels in singing this song of gratitude upon crossing the sea. So Miriam says this shiru. She's in this moment of present. We're singing to God. And if you look in that same chapter 15, Perek Tet Vav, in Shema, it says the beginning of the song is actually Az Yashir Moshe Ovnei Israel. Az Yashir, then one day Yashir Moshe Ovnei Israel, Moshe and the people of Israel will sing this song. And what are they going to sing? Ashira laHashem ki ga'oga. Ashira ladonai ki ga'oga. Ashira ladonai ki ga'oga. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi chamocha ne'edar ba'kodesh nachita v'chastecha amzugelta. Nachita v'chastecha amzugelta. Ashira, Ashira, Ashira. There can be miracles. I'm not going to sing that part, but I had a request for some drumming, so I had to make sure that happened. That was for you, Baruch. So she says, the men, when they're singing, when the whole community is singing together, they say, Ashira, we're going to sing. I will sing this song. And it's a really interesting grammatical difference because it sounds to me like one person is in the present moment and somebody else is or one group of people are singing in the present moment and the other group are singing in some sort of future tense. And there's a lot of discussion around this throughout commentaries, both mystical and less mystical. What does it mean to be singing in the present, and what does it mean to be singing in the future? And I think in our lives, we often spend our time singing in the future. We say, one day when I, get that promotion, one day when I, finish my dissertation, one day when I meet my partner, one day when the kids grow up and go off to college, then I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do that and I'm going to sing in the future. Singing in the present is very different. Singing in the present is when we have our feet on the ground because we've just come through the water and we're actually putting our feet down and saying, we're here. And everything that's happening now is worth celebrating. And everything that's happening now is exactly what's meant to be. And I'm going to sing to that. I'm going to celebrate to that. So even if I'm still in the job that I don't love, I'm going to do this like I care about it and it actually means something to me. And if it doesn't mean anything to me, maybe I'm going to find another way to enrich my life. If I'm waiting for something to happen, I'm going to live this moment like this is what's happening. And I want to say that for a lot of us, we've had this lesson in a really intense way when I'm having some memories of just like a month ago, going down the street in Jerusalem one night after one of my evening classes and wanting to stop at this place and get a bowl of soup. They have really good soup. And sort of thinking, should I sit outside? Nah, I'll come back another time. And then I was like, I had some kind of like, intuition. I was just feeling like, who knows what's going to happen. At that point, I thought I might get quarantined. That was the worst of my worries. Like I was going away for a weekend to London. What if I get quarantined on the way back? I never thought that we might be in this scenario where everyone's quarantined and it's months and months. And I just went and said, I'll do it another time. And there were so many moments like that where I think back just in the last couple of months where I said, I don't need to go and check out this class, or I don't need to go and meet up with this person in a different city. It'll be okay. I'll do it another time. And we're realizing now that we're living in a world where we don't have that option because we're living in complete uncertainty. And sometimes when we're living in such deep uncertainty, the best thing to do is to put our feet on the ground and be in this present moment of singing right now. So there's a couple of things that I want to think about with relation to Miriam's song and the idea of singing to the future or singing to the present. And also, what is the future that we're creating and what is the present? So, water. Okay, Miriam represents water. Miriam's also one of our very few prophetesses, so one of the few females that we have. So there's obviously a lot to learn from her and a lot that our mystic tradition learns about her based on how we understand the feminine. What is the embodiment of feminine energy? And what's interesting is that, when we talk about feminine and masculine energies in the world, we are very quick to say, well, that's a feminine energy. It doesn't mean that all women are like that. No, absolutely not. It doesn't mean all women are like that. But it does mean that this energy that's really powerful in the world is accessible to women in a really, really deep and powerful way. And it means that because we've been living in a world that for many generations has oppressed women and has oppressed feminine energy, that oppression has landed on women disproportionately to men because they hold that feminine energy. And that feminine energy has been oppressed more, even in men, more than they have been in women. So what are some of those things? So let's talk about we're still thinking about water. One of the functions of water, if we think about our bodies, so our bodies are made up of 4 elements, right? They're made up of earth, wind, fire, and water. So the water is obviously our blood. The earth is our skin and our bones. The breath is that which we breathe, it keeps us alive. And the fire is our soul and our spark and our, everything that actually animates us in that way. And the water in our body, the blood, has a really interesting task because it's not there to do the heavy duty work of what these cells themselves do. It's there to be a transportation mechanism, bringing the oxygen and the platelets and everything that's needed from cell to cell, the glucose, everything like that. It's a transportation network. Now, we live in a world where for a long time, we've put a lot of value on the work of the cells and not enough value on the work of the transportation network. And it's a very easy thing to see right now because all we need to do is open up your favorite local news site and you'll see that we're talking about our essential workers and we're saying, oh my God, our nurses, our educators, our teachers, our childcare workers, our restaurant workers, our delivery drivers, our truck drivers, our couriers. These are all really important people. These are people that literally help us live our day-to-day lives. And for so many years, since the Industrial Revolution, or even before that, we've been allowing our society to be paying millions of dollars to the CEOs who make the decisions. You could call them the brains or the cells who do what we call the important work. And what we think is the less important work, the work of the water, the work of the blood, the work of the circulatory system, has been seen as secondary. And this is much more related to gender than we can ever imagine. Partly because a lot of these people are women, and partly because a lot of this work is what, when you look at feminine energy, was represented by the feminine. For example, it might have been the work of nurturing, of caring, of taking care of those who are in need, the vulnerable, people who do work in nursing, people who do work in education, people who do work in cooking and preparing food. All of that has been seen as feminine work because, hundreds of years ago, that was the work. It was the hunter versus the gatherer. It was the person who took care of the children and the person who taught them how to speak and the person who prepared the food back home. And that was not as important as the hunter, because the hunter would go out and bring home meat, and it was a big accomplishment. And I'm not saying that one is more important than the other, but we definitely know that there's been a disproportionate focus on that outward going work of being the hunter, of being the cell. I mean, the most recent obvious example that I use from my own life, those of you who've known me for a long time know that about 15 years ago, my first job, I was 19 years old, fresh out of seminary, and I worked for a company in Australia that made consumer goods, shoes mainly, and clothing. And we had very much of a gender divide in the office because we had the men who did mainly what they considered to be creative work, which was not really creative, like super, artsy, but it was more like coming up with ideas, making phone calls to make sales to customers, which was like big customers, department stores. And there was a big team of women who kept the entire machine running. We filled out the paperwork. We did all of the orders. We did all of the schedules. We did all of the packaging. We communicated with the customers. We made sure, someone could say, I want this shoe to get to this department store by this date. And I knew all of the different steps of paperwork that had to happen in between to actually make it happen. I would communicate with the factories and the suppliers. It was a lot of communication. It was a lot of talking. It was a lot of paperwork. It was a lot of details. And that was a very intrinsically feminine work. It was something that back then, a lot of women were in that role. There were a couple of men, but a lot of women were in that role. I think that the men were capable of being in that role. I think they were afraid to be in that role. And I think for the company, it was cheaper to have women in that role and more effective. So that's, my own sort of scars that I have from corporate life of seeing how the work of being the blood, of being the water, of moving and communicating was not at all valued as opposed to doing the work of the cell. And it's not because it's not important. It's not because, so I should have been able to be one of those people who was the moving and the shaking and the decision making. Sure, I wanted to do that and I, tried to get myself in that direction. But why couldn't they look at the work that I was doing in that way and see that as powerful? Why can't we look at the work of somebody who was a childcare worker and her job or his job is to know 20 different kids, to know their likes and their dislikes and their allergies and their fears and how they like to fall asleep and knows how to take care of that? Why is that any less important than somebody who knows how to crunch data in a spreadsheet? Or how to, have meetings with their clients, or even, an executive assistant who knows every client's likes and dislikes and their children's birthdays, and somebody else who just knows how to come into the client and schmooze. It's very interesting how in our society we just have gone for so long without paying attention to this water energy, to this energy that communicates and collaborates and brings things together and gives us the information that we need. I'm very engaged in conversations in the Jewish nonprofit professional world around why is there such a gender inequity around the percentage of female managers is extraordinarily high, but the percentage of female managers in leadership roles, on a C-suite level or executive level is much lower. These organizations are completely powered by feminine energy. Some are actually women and some of them are just people who are in this feminine role because they need to know how to communicate and carry a lot of different pieces of information and details. And they need to do like what we're talking about with Miriam. They need to know how to reach into the depths, the mysterious depths, to go into the darkness, to go into the unknown, to deal with uncertainties, to deal with mysteries, to deal with what's coming up, and to actually channel that into something that's nourishing and uplifting. So, okay, that's one piece. So when we think about Miriam and this, yes, oh my God, I'm so happy you're here, Yocheved. Yocheved will be my exhibit A for this scenario. But yes, 70% of the workforce in the Jewish nonprofit arena is female. But there's I don't know the percentage, but maybe 10% or 20% of the actual leadership is female. 30% of leadership. Thank you. And barely any brown people on the top. Yes, yes, yes. So we're still dealing with this incredible gender inequity and Jews of color inequity and people anyone who's not seen as sort of the typical example in our society. And we've been doing this for hundreds, thousands of years. And why is this really the way that we need to be working moving forward? Okay, so many amazing women on here. Chanchi's on here. I love you. Okay, so the feminine is this cogs and wheels, and it's about making things move. And I think that we're in a time, so coming back to what's going on right now, we're in a time where we are being forced to look this in the eye and say, oh my God, the US Post Force, the USPS, US Postal Services, is on the brink of shutdown. They are the number one exhibit A of this feminine energy. There's a lot of, my mail carriers in Brooklyn are all women, but it doesn't matter who they are, their gender. It matters. This is feminine work. This is carrying and bringing things, and it's about to be shut down because of the other stories of what's going on in our country. So everything that we're relying on, anyone who is at home right now, who's relying on grocery delivery, who's relying on the healthcare workers to be out there collecting people in the ambulances and bringing them to the hospitals and bringing them home again. Please, God, may they all be healed. And everybody who is doing all of this essential work, they are operating in a feminine zone. Can we see that as really, really important? We're in the middle of a feminine reset, okay? We're in the middle of a feminine reset. Miriam, who, really embodies that, she's one of our 7 female prophetesses. The Midrash tells us that there's another story earlier on in Bereshit, in Shemot, earlier on in the Exodus story of the Hebrew midwives. And the Hebrew midwives are Miyaldot HaIvriyot, they're called Shifra and Pua. It depends on how you read the text, if you're they are the midwives for the Hebrews, or they are the midwives of the Hebrews. But anyway, that's just a fun biblical grammar question. And the midwives are the ones who were told by Paro, the Israelites are getting too numerous. We've got to, every baby boy, when they're born, I want you to just, when you see that the woman is about to give birth, and because you have that instinctual delivery, giving birth element, I want you to not have the baby not survive. And they obviously don't let it happen. It says the midwives feared God, and they saved the babies. And the reward that they get is, we're told that Rashi, one of the medieval commentators, tells us that they're rewarded with. Sorry, it says in the text that they're rewarded with houses. And what are the houses? The Midrash tells us that Shifra and Pua are actually Miriam and her mother Yocheved. I love that Yocheved is here. How wonderful, we get to talk about you. And that the houses that they received dynasties, and that their children and their descendants were priests and kings and people like that. But I found an incredible teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, where he says not only were they given houses, but they were actually given, through the work that they did, they established houses for the people. Their work of this feminine water creating energy of bringing things together, of revealing the mysteries, was the work of creating a foundation for homes. And we're in a time right now, again, where we've all had to go home. We're sitting at home. And some of us are really good at going out in the world. I'm really good at being out in the world. I'm really good at saying, all right, I have a schedule. I'm going to go to this event and that event. I'm going to meet up with these people. I'm going to go to this class. And the idea of being at home and saying, how do I make my home really snug and really comfy, and a place where I want to be able to, where I can productively do my work, and where I cook myself really nice food, and where I have a spot that I pray in the mornings, and a spot where I do my yoga or my dance practice. I am not there yet. Let me tell you, this has been one of the biggest challenges of the last month, is working through all that stuff and saying, I can't go out. I can't, just my problems that I think I can run away from by going out of the house, they're still here with me when I'm sitting here. And I have to actually deal with them. And if maybe it's easier for me to pray when I'm in a group, when I go to a singing circle and I can sing with everybody and dance with everybody, maybe it's easier for me to be inspired by hearing a teaching, by going to a class. But what happens when I'm at home and I have to just watch a video and learn from somebody talking on a video? What happens when I have to sit at home and pray by myself? And I'm really, really blessed actually that I've been praying and singing with my roommate the last week. It's a complete gift, because what happens when I'm at home? What happens when, as it says about these Hebrew midwives, vayas lahem batim, we make for ourselves houses. The way that I grew up in a very traditional, ultra-Orthodox home, it meant that this was the expected paradigm of me, was to know how to make a home, because inviting guests inviting guests and having a beautifully laid table and having having children and bringing them into the world was considered to be a really important part of the society. That's how Orthodox Judaism is set up. And that was really hard for me when I saw, growing into my teens, that was not going to be my path. And I saw that my path was going to be out in the world, because I didn't have the opportunity, like my friends who got married immediately did, to create that environment, to create that experience. And I think it's still one of the fundamental flaws, actually, of Orthodox Judaism, is that the focus on the home leaves people who don't have partners out. On the flip side, in liberal Judaism and in contemporary American society, the lack of focus on the home, I think, is one of our fundamental failures and flaws as a society, because when we don't pay attention to where we are, to literally a daled amot, a 4 amot, which is at the 2 meters, the 6 feet that we're talking about, we don't pay attention to those surroundings, we're not able to take care of what we can actually do to transform the world. Everyone's been talking for the last 4 years about politics is going to save us, and it's very important to do the organizing and to do your civic duty, and I'm not advocating against that, but that's only part of it. What's really part of it is getting to know our neighbors, growing our own food, shopping locally and supporting local businesses, creating communities and gathering spots where we can look out for each other, taking care of our own families and the people that we live with and our own connections. All of that is going to tighten, it's going to weave a really tight fabric that nothing can break. That's what grassroots is. So sure, you can try and have some kind of effect from what's going on above, but we're talking here about water that rises from the ground. We're talking about the waters that are surging right now. The flood has come and we're here, and we've got to be skating around it and swimming in it and saying, now that the feminine energy is rising, now that we're seeing how vital those people are who do our deliveries and do our education and take care of our healthcare, what am I doing in that same way? And it might be being present at home, to be with our families, to be educating children, those who are doing the best they can to homeschool, and no judgment, I know how hard that is. Or those of us who are focusing on our relationships with the people within our neighborhoods. That's what can actually get us through a period like this of immense change, because all of the structures that are above are crumbling and they're going to be gone soon. And we're going to get to that in a second. Hang on. I made a deal with myself a couple of years ago. I'm going to start speaking slowly, and I did not do that tonight. I know I've been speaking very quickly. I'm sorry. So we're in this moment of shift, and we're in this moment of saying, okay, we have to bring things into the world in an embodied way, in a real way. And what does that look like? So let's talk a little bit about Miriam and the vision that she had when she got to the other end of the sea, when she got to that point of saying Shiru LaHashem, let's sing to God. So there's an incredible teaching that I learn every year on this day, or around this time, from Ma'or Shemesh, who was a 17th century Hasidic Rebbe, Kalanimus Kalman Epstein. And it's so powerful because I remember the day that I found it, it was like a piece of something that I'd always known. I saw it written black on white in Hebrew, by someone from 250 years ago, and I was just blown away. Because what happens when Miriam and the women get to the other side? They're drumming, and maybe we'll drum for another song for you in a minute. They're drumming and they're singing and they're dancing. And there's something really powerful along with this feminine energy that represents, the movement and the collective communication and the getting things done, the cogs in the wheel of water. There's also an aspect of experiencing it in the physical body. Because, you can read there's some great teachers like Christiane Northrup who writes about, the feminine body as being something that is immensely physical and immensely spiritual at the same time. Because it's a body that changes constantly. It's experiencing an ongoing cycle, through the monthly cycle, but also through the lifetime, going from puberty through to maturity and, gestation and having children and then into menopause. It's not static, right? Those of you who read Twilight, I was really into Twilight, don't judge me. We know that the reason that Bella can get pregnant and Edward can impregnate her is because the male body does not change. From the day he turned 17 and became a vampire, he had, a store of sperm and he was able to get her pregnant and nothing changes. But she is a woman whose body changes. So female vampires, their bodies stay exactly the same from the day they become vampire. So she can't, a female can't get pregnant because your body needs to change. But she's a human, so her body's still changing. So she can get pregnant. Anyway, for some reason I find vampire pregnancy fascinating. But in general, we're experiencing the cyclical nature of being, right? That's really what the feminine represents. And that's why there's such a correlation between the feminine and the moon. Not just women, but the feminine energy of the world. All of the waters, we've been talking about water, the tides are affected by the moon. The Jewish people who are seen as feminine in relation to the relationship with God are likened to the moon that comes and goes and rises and falls. And almost every single tradition, every ancient wisdom tradition has a different mythological tale about the moon and its relationship to the sun as something that was originally one of equilibrium, where the moon became smaller for whatever reason. And I remember learning it the first time I was a child and I went to a concert and this woman was singing this beautiful Italian opera and she said, this is about the sun and the moon and how they were once lovers and then they stopped. And, the moon just started having to circle herself around the sun. And then when I was in 7th grade, we were memorizing French poetry. And again, this same tale in a French poem. But of course, the first time I heard the story, I was in 1st grade and I was learning the creation story. And I heard this story from my teacher about the moon wanting to not understanding why the moon and the sun had to be the same size and the moon becoming small. And it took me years until I read the original Midrash. It's in the Talmud, Chulin 60b, and learning the story of how when the moon became small, that was a shift in everything that the feminine represented. That's why our essential workers don't get paid enough, essentially, because that was the moon that represented all that feminine energy, went from being something that was in equilibrium, in shared joint ownership with the sun, into something that became under a hierarchy. So with all of that in mind, what was Miriam experiencing? Oh, so part of that is also the body. And ecofeminism, which really aligns with this a lot, talks a lot about the idea that in a society where people have felt like it's okay to oppress women, it's okay to oppress the earth, and vice versa. If it's okay to oppress the earth, to mine the earth, to throw waste into the earth, it's okay to oppress women, to rape women, to, buy and sell them as property, all of those things, because the earth is feminine. The earth is the mother. The earth goes through, again, has bodily cycles just like women. And that can be scary because if you're dealing with a position of static existence of, okay, I'm born this way and my male body never changes, and society is like masculine society and things aren't meant to change. They're meant to, we're trained into industrial assembly line work. The idea of something being dynamic and flowing and changing is very scary. And the same with the body. So the body was maligned. The body was like, You've got to transcend your body. You've got to reach enlightenment by using the mind, not the body. But when the women come out of the water, when the Israelites come out of the water, not just the women, and the women start to sing, what do? They're using drums. So if you have a drum, you can practice this, but when you bang a drum, it's a vibration. I'm drumming very softly because it's very late. It's the middle of the night here in Jerusalem. I'm living on East Coast time. And you can feel a vibration that goes all the way through the body. The same thing with the song, the voice. When we sing, we're taking in air, we're taking in breath, and then that song affects every part of our body to the extent that when we sing, we know that people use different healing sounds to actually affect all the waters in the body, because if we know that that water is affected by sound, and then obviously the water in our body is affected by the vibrations and the frequencies. So when we drum, when we sing, we actually can physically affect every single part of our body. And this practice has been part of our tradition since time immemorial, because we've had drums. We had drums that moment at the sea, and then we built a sanctuary and we built a temple, and we always had women who were drumming, and we always had Levites who were singing, and we always had mourning women who would call out with their voices. We've always had people who do this very deep, intense work of connecting heaven and earth with the song and with the dance and with the drumming. So something really, really powerful was happening here at this moment. And for those of you who have the text that I sent out, the question on this phrase, when Miriam goes out and she starts to dance with the women, we have a term used, batupim or b'mecholot, with these drums and with mecholot. Mechol is some kind of dance. So we've got to understand a little bit about what this dance is. What is this dance doing that is so radically shifting, that is able to perform, again, like, it's crazy that we're talking about this right now, because I'm literally seeing this happening in the world right now. We've entered this dance. What are they doing? So a machol is like, when I was growing up in Australia, there was an Israeli dance group called machol. Machol is a dance, a circle dance. But we have this quote from the Talmud in Tani, which says, in the future to come, in the messianic era, in the whatever you want to call it. It's interesting because right now we're going through this process, and there's a really beautiful term that the students of Joanna Macy, who is an ecofeminist teacher, uses, which is the great turning. So you can call it Mashiach, you can call it redemption, you can call it utopia, you can call it dystopia if that's what you really think it's going to be. I have higher hopes than that. But that moment, Latid Lavo, okay, so it's in the Gemara, it's just called Latid Lavo, the future to come. What does it say? The Holy One, God, will arrange Machol Bakerem, a dance of, hang on, I want to get this right, Lasat Machol Tzadikim, a circle dance for the righteous ones, and God will be sitting among these people in the Garden of Eden, and each and everyone will point to God with their finger. Okay, this is brilliant. So this is really fun, because we know that all of the Song of the Sea talks about people saying, Ze Eli v'anvehu, this is my God and I will praise God. Why? And there's again, like these midrashim, these rabbinic stories of the Exodus are so rich, and they help us understand it so well that we talked about how the women, they were giving birth, and the midwives were sort of trying to help them save the children. One of the things they did is they would give birth in the fields. And this is in the Talmud Sota, and it's incredible. They would give birth in the fields, and then they would leave their children, and because they had to for safety reasons, and they would hide in the fields. They would sort of like be like little toadstools, like pop down in under the ground, and an angel would feed them milk and honey from a rock. And when in the Song of the Sea we say Ze Eli v'anvehu, who was saying, like, Ze is a definite article. It's like this. It was those little babies who, they're like, yeah, this is my God. I know, I recognize her. I recognize him. I recognize it. I recognize God, because this is who I fed from. This is like the breast that I suckled when I was born in the field. And that's what it looks like when I'm at the sea, when they're at the sea and they're being redeemed. They're like, yeah, this is it. So this future to come, this utopian world that we are on the verge of approaching. Okay, it's not, the transition is rocky, the transition is rough. We're having a hard time right now. It's devastating. I've cried every day this week, but this is the world that we're approaching. And it's you can talk to so many different spiritual teachers from so many different walks of life right now, and everyone's saying the same thing. We're in this transitionary process. So what's going to happen when we get to this point, when we're in that Edenic Garden of Eden? The righteous will have this dance of the righteous, and they're all going to be able to point to God with their finger and be like, yes, this is God. How cool is that? Okay. So how does that work? I'm going to back up a little bit. Again, if you have, I posted the texts in the thing. I've not ever taught a text study online before, but just like every New York public school teacher, I guess now's the time to learn. And these are all texts that are brought down by the Ma'or Shemesh, by Colonimus Kalman Epstein, about this idea of what was going on. For those of you who just joined us, what was going on with Miriam and her dance. Miriam, who was bringing the women together to sing and dance in this circle. What was going on when they had to do this dance, and they sang it in the present tense? They sang, "This is my God." Shiru Lashem. Now I'm going to sing to God. So a little bit of Kabbalah 101. I'm not going to get into too much detail about it. And personally, I know we have Yochanan watching, which is very exciting. And Yochanan is an incredible teacher of Kabbalistic tarot. You should all check out his channel. I don't teach the technical elements of Kabbalah, because I'm really more focused on like how we're going to bring this into our lives. But to give us like a little bit of a background, and I have here a text from the Arizal from Rabbi Yitzchak Luria in Eitz Chaim, which says, all right, prior to creation, I'm just reading, there was source, right? We had the infinite, we had Or Ein Sof, which means the ultimate, unlimited, infinite source that filled all of existence, okay? So when you're living in an existence like that, you're just God, and there's no space for anyone or anything else, because everything is source energy. In order for source energy to manifest itself into the world that we see, where I am me, and I have here a phone, and I have here a bottle of water, and I have here a sacred text, and all of these things feel very different than God and God in itself, when there needed to be some sort of like separation. And the way that was done was through a form of contraction, which is called Tzimtzum. And Tzimtzum was when God took God's self and all of God's infinite light and condensed all of that into one point that contained everything, and was able to restrict it so that there was a void. Chalal hapanoi, and we have this void from which the world is now able to come into being, because that's an area where suddenly there's no consciousness of God. There's only what can be outside of it. If we're going to live in a world where we don't have that consciousness, we need to have that void to start with. And from there, that initial point came out a line, this straight line, which was then able to permute itself into all of the different levels of divine light that manifested into this level and that level and that level, until we end up with a plastic water bottle sponsored by Miriam, which is, I think, Masorti Olami. Now, the way that this was structured is, all right, Baruch, you're jumping ahead of me. You're jumping ahead. So yes, absolutely. That's where we're going. We're going towards a future of high consciousness. So I think I should learn to not look at what I'm seeing in the comments, but it's really good to have all of you here, Yachan and Baruch and everybody. So what's happening? This is how the world was set up. We had this point of light. We had a line that came out from it. Now, any of you who are familiar with any type of teachings of Lurianic Kabbalah, which is one of the most popular forms of how people nowadays see Kabbalah, is that everything is a relationship of sfirot. Sfirot are like the different energies or attributes or building blocks of the divine in line form. So you have, for example, I'm actually teaching right now a course every single day. If you sign up, you'll get an email every day where I talk about the Sfirot for this period of Sfirot HaOmer. And we learn how the Sfirot are basically energetic building blocks that work with one another and have relation with one another so that they can go out into the world and create something. So if you had just the Sphira of Chesed, which is the one we're talking about this week, that Sphira is all about flow. It's a fusion and generosity and giving, just like water flowing straight. And its counterpoint would be gevura, which is like a restriction, a containment, the ability to channel the water in a direction, channel the flow in a direction. Because if you just had flow, then it's everywhere. But if you just had restriction, then you would have nothing. So we have the flow and we have the restriction of the flow, and then we have where they sort of synthesize together with Tiferet, which is the balance and the fusion of both. So you can have, this combination of like love and severity, or giving and receiving, or compassion and balance, and that all lives there. So when you look at the way that this is drawn out, and what I just read to you is actually from Etz Chaim, which means tree of life, you see that it's drawn out in a way where the relationships are all linear, okay? We constantly have a moment where this is going to give to this, and then this is going to receive from that, and that's going to give to that, and that's going to receive to that. It's all a linear structure. And that is something that we actually see in our world. It's not just, drawn up on charts for those of us who like to do Kabbalistic tarot, but it's something that we actually experience in our life. I will quote the very holy How I Met Your Mother, which for some reason, if anyone's gone back to watch some of those shows that we used to watch a lot, I don't know if I'm so into it anymore. Like, I feel like it's like incredibly, homophobic and incredibly misogynistic in certain ways. But anyways, I loved How I Met Your Mother for a time. It was a big part of my life in the late 2000s. And in How I Met Your Mother, they talk about relationships they're pretty much talking about heterosexual relationships, but they also could be talking about gay relationships. And they say there's always a reacher and a settler. There's always somebody who's like the one who really, really, really loves and has a crush and really wants this person. There's always the one who's like, well, you know what, like, fine, I'll go for that person. Like, okay, like, yeah, it's going to work out. And in the end, some of these people end up with like very happy relationships and very happy marriages, but they're saying that there's always somebody who is a little bit batting out of their league to get like, oh, okay, I just lost connection for a second. They think they can do better. So that's a really crass example, but happens to be we live in a world that is very hierarchical. We live in a world where I have my employer, and my employer tells me what to do, and then I have the work that I do, and then I have the people that work with me and my team, and I give them work to do. And then they might have the work that an assistant who reports to them. And we live that way, or we've been living that way for a very long time. We've been living in a world of hierarchy where I'm giving you something. That means that you're receiving it from me. That means that at that moment I have the upper hand. It means that I'm the giver and you're the receiver. And every Kabbalistic chain of events happens in this dynamic. It's called mashpia and makabel. The mashpia is the one who is, the translation would be influencing, or the one who is bestowing, or the one who is passing on. And the makabel literally means receiver. It's the one who's on the receiving end and getting everything. And every single structure in Kabbalah is always set up in that way. It's like, this receives from this, and this receives from this, and this one feeds this one, and it also has a conduit coming from the other one, but that one's not really, it's not really always in play. It only just sometimes works that way. And there's always this this very structural, very dynamic, structural, hierarchical, that's what I'm looking for, very structural hierarchical relationship. Can't believe I forgot that word. That's powerful. And in this, something's happening in this machol, but in this machol tzadikim, in this future machol that the righteous are going to experience, that is different. What is that? Why is it all about a dance, a circle dance? So, again, some Kabbalah 101 is that this hierarchical way of existence was not necessarily plan A. Okay? It was maybe like a plan B, plan C. The universe originally, like we have this metaphor of the moon, was supposed to be about, sorry, God bless, was supposed to be about equilibrium and collaboration. So when the moon and the sun were created as two kings, and the moon says it in the Talmud, two kings can't share one crown. She was saying, God, I get that this world was built so that ideally, the ideal scenario is where two kings can share a crown and we can both work together, but it's not sustainable. We can't handle that. We need a hierarchy. And, that's the moment when we have this diminishment of the moon. God says, okay, fine, you're right, you need a hierarchy. The moon argues and she says, well, I pointed out the problem. Why am I now the one on the lower side of the hierarchy? And that moment of shift is the moment that resulted in these structures the way that they are. And there's more complicated processes in that Kabbalistic shift of when we went from things being in what would potentially have been a circular fashion to being in a linear fashion. Because originally, if you think about all of these building blocks as what are different ways that they can relate to each other, and my friend Becca Starr did an incredible job representing this visually, and I'll try and send a diagram of it that she did. But we were talking about it because if you look at what are some of the potential models that you can have all of the spherot before they were sort of lined up in this hierarchical diagram. You could have had them all just living on their own, right? And that's one of the Kabbalistic prototypes of the universe, is that, you just kind of had like, this is on its own, and I put all my things away. No, I didn't. Where are all my cups from? And I put, I have this is on its own, and this is on its own, and they can't connect with each other at all. There's like no way that they can have a relationship because they're just each on their own. Then if you try to put them all into one vessel and you have every single one of them together, again, they can all work together, but they don't have any of their own identity, any of their own consciousness. And it was only by creating that linear model where, okay, so it's good that I have cups available, where this pours into this, that I can actually have something where this has its own existence, this has its own existence, but this is capable of connecting to this because this can be a receiver and this can be a giver. And that's the world we live in, you guys. Like, I've been in all kinds of workplaces before. I've had bosses, I've had co-workers, and there's always some form of hierarchy. Even if she's technically on the same team as me, but she has a better relationship with the boss, so she's a little bit higher up, right? Or maybe I'm technically in the same team as all these people, but I'm the one who's, what was the word? I used to like take care of a lot of the processes. I used to do a lot of the like organizing and creating processes and stuff like that. So maybe a little bit higher up. There's always that dynamic, and we can be trying to change it. I have here again, if you have the texts, I have them in the comments. I have here a little quote about social dominance theory, which explains how and why social structures seem to be supported by an unspoken hierarchy of groups based on a number of traits. And they might be gender, race, age, economic status. So there's also that element of there of like, that we sort of tend to live that way. And we've been doing it for a long time, you guys. We've been doing this since, like I said, this moon story happened on the 4th day of creation. And we've just been sort of going along with it, saying, yeah, it's all good. Like, there are certain moments in my life. Yes, Yocheved. Okay, so this is a whole separate area that I'm not going to talk about today, but reimagining organizations. There is a ton of work being done on rethinking how we do our organizations into flatter structures, into more collaborative, different ways of doing groups. And there's actually some really interesting work being done on business through the feminine principle. And this is actually an area that I'm researching, and hopefully we'll be able to focus some of my teaching on it. I'm really hoping that at some point in the next year, I can offer an online course on this, on how to start working on transforming our workplace cultures, and also how we handle the workplace using the feminine principle. And if Hallie's still on here, I know Hallie does a lot of amazing work in this area as well. She's a spiritual business coach who works with women. And there's some amazing stuff written on this, on we are seeing that change. Like, it's been going on for so long, but we're actually ready to start seeing a shift, and the shift is totally happening. Yeah, so Sivan, you're saying, this hierarchy, there's a few corporations. Totally, we live this all the time. I mean, we're dealing with like, the 1%. This is the 1%. This is a scenario where, most of America's wealth is owned by the same few individuals, and, there's a lot of people who can't eat. This is a mitziut. This is a reality that we are in the process of breaking away from, and it's scary AF. It's really scary because it's all we've ever known. Even though we know it's not right, even though we know we don't want to be living like this, even though we know we don't want our children to live like this, it's really scary to break out of it. And what does this non-hierarchy look like? Because from what we just learned in Kabbalah, everything is set up that there's a giver and a receiver and a hierarchy, and there can't be any other way. Like, we've been talking for a long time about patriarchy, right? What's patriarchy? It's a society that is predisposed towards leadership from the masculine principle and from men. And what's really scary right now from what's happening in our world is that we have a lot of older men, leaders, who are passing, who are getting sick with this disease, with COVID-19 and passing. And, I was crying to a friend at some point, I lost track of days recently, and I said, we said we don't want patriarchy, but we didn't say we don't want patriarchs. Because the patriarchs are the good guys. We have really, really beautiful, compassionate, strong male leaders who we're losing right now. And it's a very scary moment that this shift is being so harsh. And a big part of our prayer is that this shift doesn't need to be so harsh, because we don't want the patriarchy as a structure, but there are patriarchs who've been involved in that structure who are good people, and we love them, and we care for them, and we pray for them. And it's so, so important that we don't lose sight, that we don't conflate the two. In that same vein, the opposite of patriarchy is not matriarchy. I love to talk about it, I joke about it, bring on the matriarchy. But the matriarchy would imply that there is a single female, or there are single females who are still operating in the hierarchy. And the whole purpose of this cosmic shift, according to Kabbalah and according to Hasidus, that I'm going to read to you in a minute, is that we actually want to change the whole structure of, the whole shape of it. We want to change the whole way that we relate to each other. We don't just want to say, okay, instead of men being in charge, we have women in charge. Ecofeminism talks to us about the fact that in societies where people have been oppressing the earth and oppressing women, there's a conflation. When we bring women into leadership, we can start to see things from a more holistic level, because we're employing the feminine principle to understand earth, to understand nature, to understand society. And in fact, there was a meme going around about the 6 countries that are doing well right now during this entire COVID crisis have all female leadership. And, I can't say anything about that, but it's an interesting thing to look at. But what we're really looking to create over here is a different consciousness. It doesn't need to be women, but it needs to be a different consciousness. Elephants. Yeah, I'm going to go to elephants. I'll tell you why. Elephants live in matriarchal societies. And I just read an incredible book. It's a great way to spend a day of holiday. It's called The Elephant Whisperer by a guy called Lawrence Anthony from South Africa, Zululand. He passed away, unfortunately, which is very upsetting. You spend the whole Chag reading a book and you get really into it, and then you go online and Google it afterwards and you find out the guy's no longer living, which is very sad. And he was running a game reserve in South Africa, in Zululand, and he was approached by people who asked if he wanted to take on these elephants. And they had been very abused. They'd been through a very hard time, and he said yes. And they tried to break out multiple times, and he talks about how he ended up going down to the place, like they sort of have like a quarantine pen, a boma, where they acclimate them to the new place with electric fence. And every morning at 4:45 a.m. he was camped out right there with one of his rangers, and he would see this matriarch, Nana, and she would stare at him, and he started talking to her. He said, Nana, don't do it. Don't do it. And he built this incredible relationship with the elephants. It's fascinating. I highly recommend it. They would come to visit his house when he was on business trips. They would come to greet him when he got home, and they knew they had such a deep communication system that if he missed his flight, they knew that he missed his flight, and they would turn around and go back to the bush until he came home and come. And the day he died, at that point they were not as involved with the house. And the day he died, which was however many years ago, 5-10 years ago, they actually came all the way out from the bush. And what's amazing about the elephants is that they have a matriarch. So the matriarch is in charge, and she has her sisters, the aunts, and the young boys, when they sort of reach puberty, these young bulls are moved to the side of the herd, and they are less involved in the day-to-day of the herd. And ideally, if there's a big enough community, they actually form these askeri bachelor herds where they go off with like an older male bull, an older bull who's also single, and he acts as like an uncle grandfather, and he takes care of these guys and he teaches them good manners. They come back into the herd, to mate with the women and to have children, but mostly they live in these bachelor herds, and they take very good care of this old man elephant until he dies. And it's a very interesting family system. And when you think about it, it's amazing that it's matriarchy and the women are in charge, and they do an incredible, they pay a lot of attention to loyalty and to community and to parenting. And it's an incredible thing to think about a matriarchal society. But that is not the be-all and end-all. The be-all and end-all is something completely different. And when we go back to what does it mean when it says in the Gemara Ta'anit that God is going to create a machol tzaddikim, this circle dance for the tzaddikim, we're going to get away from this hierarchy, this reacher, settler, structural hierarchy, and we're going to create something that is infinitely different. What does that look like? So I'm going to read from this Ma'or V'Shemesh from Rabbi Kalanimus Kalman Epstein. He says like this: what's going to happen? In the future to come, Latid Lavo, and people, I'm telling you that future to come is now. We're literally in the factory room creating this right now, and it's scary, I know, but we're doing it together. That's why I'm talking right now. In the future to come, every being will rectify the aspect of their soul at its root. That means every one of us is going to be, like I said with Miriam, feet on the ground, connected to the source of water that comes up from below. We're going to know what we have to do. We're going to know what we're here for, and we're going to be focusing on that thing. The divine sparks will be elevated, because again, when you know your purpose, when you're living in alignment with the divine, in consciousness of the divine, everything is elevated into a state of, I see God, I know God, this is God. And the externalities will be nullified. So we won't look at this and say it's a cup. We're going to say this is God. This is a way that God manifests God's self to be a container for something. So the pure bright light of divine will shine through all the worlds. We're going to literally be living in God consciousness. And guys, this isn't so far removed from truth, because we all have those breathtaking moments when, you walk outside and you say, oh my God, like look at that incredible sunrise. I love sunrise. Look at that incredible sunset. Look at those incredible trees. You hear a baby laughing. You say, wow, you see God. We have those moments. We don't have those moments so much when we live surrounded by concrete and plastic and all those things. We say, it's hard for us to see it. One of the benefits of living a life with ritual and with spiritual practice, and that's what Judaism does so incredibly well, is that we have a framework for this, because we constantly have, every morning you wake up and the way you put your shoe on, you can see how your shoe is a vehicle for consciousness by saying, my shoe is going to send me off on my way to do good things for people. And I tie that shoe with consciousness, and bang, suddenly I see my shoe as part of God. And it's incredible to really live our lives on that level. We're working towards that right now. We are getting there. It's happening. It's happening because we have no choice. So what happens when we get to that point where we all know who we are and our souls are rectified at their root, which means that all the old karma and all the old baggage that we came in with and all of our ancestors and all of the BS that they brought in and that we feel sometimes we're all working through, that we're healing that. That's why we feel such intense energy right now. That's why I can't sleep. It's 4 a.m. and I can't sleep. I've just been, there's so much moving right now in the world. That's going to be rectified. That's happening. That's being rectified. The externalities are going to be nullified. The shells, the klipot, that which gets in the way of us seeing godliness, that's all going to be gone. It's all going. So there's going to be this divine light shining. We're going to see, yes, Ze Eli, this is my God. What happens when we get to that point? The line shifts into a circle. And I usually have a prop to show. Let's see if I can do it with this. The line shifts into a circle. So how does that work? Right now, what you guys see looks like a line because of the angle of the camera. Okay, you see a line, but this is actually a business card, which means that I am moving it like this, and like this, and like this, and like this, and like this. And as we move, all that changes your perspective, but now all of a sudden you see a square, but pretend it's a circle, pretend it's a coin. You went from seeing something that was a line into something that was a full dimensional being. That is what people call ascension. That is the shift from 3D to 5D, as people call it. I mean, that's a whole different area of spiritual language that I'm not super up to date with, but I really think it's no different than talking about messianic consciousness, talking about La'atid Lava, as we just read about in the Talmud. It's the moment of saying, yeah, everything was in a line, and the Sefirot were relating to each other in a line, and I was relating to my friends and my community and my boss and my partner in a line, and now I'm moving into this moment where suddenly everything's going to be in a circle. Crazy, right? So how does this circle consciousness work? What does it actually look like? And we can talk about different forms of organizations in corporate. It's a great way of looking at it. Because if you're going to look at an organizational chart, I usually show this on a table, and my table is not, it's like on the bottom here. Let's see if I can set this up for you guys in a way that you can see it. Okay, so, all right, I'm setting it up. Let's see. How do I turn the camera around? I hope that does it. Okay, so let's say we have this. This is our central point. This water bottle, this is God. This is the source. This is the source that brings out the light, that effuses everything, that is the divine. Or any sort of central, it could be in a business scenario. So normally we might have like, this is the source, and the source gives to this, which gives to this, right? Which gives to that, which I'm going to run out of table space. But if we had a circle, then what happens is like this. This is in the middle, and this is on the side, and this is over here, and this is over here. And now the relationships are non-hierarchical because everyone has the same access to the center. So I can access from here, and they can access from here, and they can access from here, and we're all equidistant. This is the key word. Everyone is equidistant from the source. Everyone is equally distant from the main thing. So what happens, to quote what he says here, and I can show you the text, just as in the matter that a circle has no beginning and no end, no longer will one need to learn from their neighbor, but will access divine wisdom like the circle dance in the vineyard, when the central line in the circle is equidistant from everyone on the edges. So what's happening here is it's like a maypole. I think I even have a picture of a maypole on here. A maypole. A maypole is when everybody, it's an ancient pagan feminine goddess dance, celebrating the spring, because it's saying we're all connected to the center and we all take our piece and we all receive. It also means that our relationship with each other is different, because instead of me looking at, let's say I've got amazing people on here right now. I've got Miriam Rubin. Miriam Rubin is an incredible educator and an incredible community builder, an incredible body worker, an incredible energy healer. And I can look at Miriam and just be like, oh my God, one day I strive to be like Miriam, right? And I have here Yochanan, and Yochanan is so knowledgeable in like Kabbalah and tarot and all these amazing things. And he's so powerful in his energy. And I have here Baruch, who is just a fountainhead of knowledge, encyclopedic knowledge. And you guys are all like such powerful, incredible friends to me and teachers to me. So I could sit here and say, okay, like, on a hierarchy level, I'm receiving. And all I want to do is be like you. But when we're in this scenario, what happens? We're all holding a ribbon around the same circle. And I'm saying, check it out. I can learn from Miriam about this, and this. I can strive to be like Miriam in this way. And like Miriam, you just wrote here, thank you, my love. I strive to be like Risha. We learn from each other, and we're not competing with one another. We're not in a hierarchical battle. We're saying, okay, I'm going to be like this and you're going to be like this. And we're all learning from one another. We're not trying to take. We're all looking to the next person and saying, I can learn from them. And that is the goal. That is the goal of this non-hierarchical dance of the tzaddikim, the dance that God and the righteous ones have to celebrate in the Garden of Eden in this future moment is a dance where suddenly there's no more hierarchy. Everyone can dance around this beautiful machol, this vineyard. Machol Bakerem is a different section. I didn't bring it in, but this vineyard dance. Everyone can dance in a circle and say, yeah, you're here and you're here. Now, those of you who know me, who are watching this, know that I have a very, very strong passion for putting things into circles physically. For example, if I teach if I'm ever teaching in a room and I come in and there's rows, sometimes I actually do an exercise. So often when I teach this exact teaching, I literally get people to rearrange the room multiple times until we can get it into a circle. I've done this before. My first day in rabbinical school, we had to do a little skit about what it is to be a rabbi, and I organized that my group did. We moved the room multiple times into different chair configurations. One was rows, one was circles, one was no chairs at all. A couple of years ago, I was working on this incredible production it was a dance about women and their alienation from the synagogue in the Orthodox world through the separation curtain. And after this dance, there was a panel with a bunch of women, like 15 incredible women who came from all different backgrounds, talking about this experience. And when we sat ourselves down in the dance studio, we were in this long line, and it just felt there was a certain energy that did not feel right. I remember looking, and I saw this woman 12 people away from me, and I said, I can't see her. I can't connect with her in a conversation. It's an assembly line. And I said, hey everyone, let's get up. And those people on the edge, move your chairs a little bit, turning inwards. And those a little closer to the edge, curve your chairs a little bit. And the next thing we knew, it took the slightest, subtlest movement, and we turned from being a line into a semicircle. And everything changed because people on this side could communicate with people on that side. And the people in the middle, we all had this way of being able to relate to each other because we were all facing the same way. In fact, one of my prayer communities, my main prayer community, Navat Tehillah in Jerusalem, which now is spread around the world, the way that we pray is concentric circles. There's no rows, there's no cantor up the front. There's just a concentric circles, and in the concentric circle is all of the different prayer leaders. So no matter which way you're sitting, we're all facing the same direction, and that direction is towards the inside. You're always connected. It's the most incredible thing that I think we all have the opportunity to actually do in our lives in so many different ways. If you ever come into a room and you feel like the energy's off, literally just invite people to sit in a circle. Pay attention, notice if there's people off on the edges who aren't in the circle, and say, hey guys, like, let's fix this up. And when we do it in a physical way, the incredible thing about, spiritual practice and embodied spiritual practice is it's magic. Once you do it, it actually happens. So what was happening at this moment at the sea, and I'm going to have to finish up because I know I've been going on for a very long time. When the women were dancing on the other end of the Red Sea, when they came out of the Yam Suf and crossed the sea, they danced in a circle. They danced in a circle because they said, hey, this hierarchy business is done. We are not living in that reality anymore. We are redeemed. We've come out of Egypt. We've come out of our constriction. We've come out of this patriarchal, hierarchical consciousness, and we are ready for a world that is circular. We are ready for a world that is non-hierarchical. We're ready for a world of new organizations. We're ready for a world where we are honored for that feminine, flowing water way of being, where we connect and we communicate and we move and we serve and we nurture. And not just women should be doing this, but also men. And where we honor our essential workers and our healthcare workers and our educators. And we do all of this by being in a circle. And the women got themselves into a circle and said, it's not Ashira. It's not Ashira Ladonai. One day there will be a future redemption, and I'm going to sing to God, Ashira, 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 Ashira. No. Shiru. Now. Now is the time. We're here. And we're doing this because we're doing it in a circle. And not only are we doing it in a circle, we're doing it in our bodies. When consciousness is that great, my teacher, Sarah Yehudit Schneider, who's written an incredible article about this teaching, it was one of those things that, I found this teaching because I was like, there's something about the dance. There's something about when women, especially Jewish women, especially women, but really anybody of any gender and of every background, dance, we are able to move stuff that's stuck in our bodies that creates something really powerful, a shift in consciousness. And Miriam is the first sort of real discussion of dance in our tradition, and it must be that what she was doing was powerful, and it must be that what she was doing was consciousness changing. I've got to find a source. And I spent a long time looking for a source, and I found the source in Ma'or Shemesh, and it was just mind-blowing to see somebody 200 years ago write out these words. And then I came across the book written by my teacher, Sarah Yehudit Schneider. It's called Kabbalistic Concepts of Masculine and Feminine, and she's written this incredible, she's taken this text and she's written explanations and commentary, and it's just beautiful. And when she talks about it, she says like this. So she's commenting on this text, which is what happens, what's Miriam really doing? The intention of Miriam, this is from Ma'or Shemesh, she says, the intention of Miriam, who took out the women after her and did these circle dances, these hakafot. Circle dances are not new in our tradition. Where else do we do circle dances? We do circle dances at weddings, okay? Bride and groom circle one another. Nowadays, mainly the bride circles the groom, but there are also grooms who circle brides, and I'm still trying to find a way for when I, please goddess, have my wedding ceremony that we can circle at the same time. But the circles of the ability to circle one another is creating a different kind of consciousness, and that circle happens at weddings because we're totally shifting our consciousness, and it also happens on Simchat Torah when we go to shul and we take out the Torahs and we're having a consciousness shift of pure embodied experience. You don't need to know how to read the Torah. You don't know how to open it up and read what's inside. You just need to hold it with your body, move your feet, move your body, and move in a circle. So there's all these different instances of circles. And Sarah Klein, God bless you, is talking about the references to people dancing in nature and nature dancing. And yes, we have all these incredible imagery. This week, because it's Pesach, we've been saying Hallel every day. And Hallel is so full of that, like the hills danced and the water danced, and yes, like nature is moving, dancing, and that again is part of that feminine consciousness, moving and dancing. Oh, this is beautiful. The Shekhinah is rising. Yes, that's exactly what's happening now. Thank you. Welcome, Lily. So what happens with this moment is something that is discussed in Kabbalistic and Hasidic literature as Nekeva Tesovev Gever, feminine encircling masculine. What does that mean? It means we're not talking about a matriarchy. We're not talking about feminine going on top of masculine. We're talking about breaking the structure entirely so that feminine and masculine circle each other like this. Actually, this is probably the best way I've ever been able to show it. And I'm gonna post a link in here to my amazing friend Becca Starr, who did an actual artistic representation of what this could look like. That moment is drawing down light from above where there is no aspect of gender. It's a moment of being beyond gender. There's no masculine, there's no feminine. That's what we're doing when we go into this circularity. That's what Ma'or Shemesh says. So we have here the explanation from Sarah Yehudit. She says, what happens when the women got in this circle? And I love seeing the powerful women who are here. Sivan and Miriam and Sarah, and as soon as I get to New York and we're allowed to see each other, we'll do as many circle dances as we can. In fact, I have this obsession when I go to weddings, when I see that the dancing is like very disparate, like in the beginning of the dancing, when it's like everyone's trying to do the first dance around the bride and it just like becomes a whole balagan, and I'm like, hey, if we all just moved out 3 steps, we could have one enormous circle, and it would be so powerful. And I've done this at Simchat Torah across Brooklyn in Grand Army Plaza, where there's all these circles, and I'm like, no, we got to get into a big circle. And I'm a little bit obsessed with this. Those of you who know me know that like one of my favorite things to do is bring the people into circles. So what's happening with the circle? Why is it so powerful? Not only to do it in a circle, but to do it in the body, in the dance. This is what Sarah Yehudit says. God bless her. She says, Miriam was able to touch these lights, this infinite source of light where we're beyond gender. There's no masculine, there's no feminine. It's just source. It's just God. And she was able to bring them down into the present through a circle dance. This exalted and required the participation of the entire body. Circle world lights, like these lights of like the future to come, are so intensely bright and complex. They don't fit into the delimited spaces of brain and mind. If you think about it, we've been living for so many generations in a world where it's like body, not so important, enlightenment, pray, meditate, transcend the mind, transcend the body, like feed the body bread and water and be an ascetic and be a monk and be a nun and be a I don't know the word for it in Eastern religions, probably also a monk, right? Like do all these things to just deprive your body because that's where the enlightenment comes. But actually, that can't, like, you can't carry all that in just your brain. You need to find a way to hold it in your body. And I think those of us who are living today, and I know definitely from the people who I see on here that are interacting, we know that a lot of our spiritual work needs to be done in the body. There's a lot of people who, you can meditate for only so long, but you can do yoga for hours, right? And for me personally, I don't do so much yoga, but I can dance for a long time, because when you allow the light, the consciousness to not only come in through the third eye, through Keter, through the crown chakra, but to actually move its way through the body, we're able to create such a much more powerful, long-lasting, embodied divine presence. I know this for myself, that when I'm in meditation, there are times when I say, I'm not getting there, I've got to get up and dance. And only when I get up and dance can I move next level. There's a few reasons for that. Part of it is to do with the fact that when we're actually moving in our bodies, where we have our feet on the earth, we can move, and all the spirit and consciousness that comes through us is given a mode of expression. So that's one way of, that's one reason why that might be an answer to it. And the other part is that by being in this embodied movement, we're taking that which was not seen as sacred and we're making that sacred. We're expanding the divine through the body. It's really, really incredible. And Sarah, what you're saying is so interesting, that Judaism seems to be constricted from body. And I think that is one of the biggest mistakes that's happened in later Judaism, not in early Judaism, but it happened later, where we sort of got very influenced by Greek philosophy and Christian culture, where we saw body as something separate and body as something that is like not good and not holy, because our whole religion is an embodied religion. All of our rituals are done in the body. Like there are 3 rituals that they say are done through the entire body, the way you're fully submerged, like immersing in the mikveh, the ritual bath, stepping into the sukkah, being in the land of Israel. There's a lot of focus on doing things in the body, and even prayer. So this is really interesting. I did a lot of study on prostration in prayer and movement in prayer. And for me, moving in prayer is so important to me. And how is it possible that our tradition doesn't have it? But if you read the Tanakh, if you read just like the biblical part of our tradition, people are prostrating everywhere. The minute they meet someone, they say, God be with you, and they get down on the ground and down on their knees. And it really seems to be that even, Rabbi Akiva, so he's sort of like, a little bit pre-Christianity, or concurrent-ish with the start of Christianity, he would prostrate a lot when he was, they say that when he was praying, he would start on one side of the room and finish on the other side of the room, because he would move up and down so much, but only when he was praying on his own. When he was praying with the community, he would sort of hold himself still. I think there's a lot to read about it, but it seems to be like there may have been a rabbinic backlash against too much prostration because they didn't want to be associated with some of the other religions at the time. But it's a really interesting thing. One of my favorite teachings from the Talmud about prayer is that there are certain moments in our prayer when we bow and we sort of, we bend like that. We bend our knees and we bend forward. And it says in the Talmud, how do we know how far to bend? And it's a few different things. Like one has to do with a coin. Can you see a coin on the ground, or that you can hold a coin in your belly? If you like really good core strength, you can like hold a coin in there. But one of them says so that the bones of the vertebrae of the spine are exposed. Why? Because we have a phrase in Tehillim, Kol atzmatai tomarna. This is one of my favorite phrases of all time. It means all of my bones speak of you, God. It's literally an expression of our bodies, our very bodies holding God's consciousness and putting it out there. So we have Kol atzmatai tomarna. We also have in Job, in Eov, he says, Mibsari echze Eloah, from my flesh I perceive God. So we have these like little nuggets, little places where we can see that we actually come from a very powerful embodied tradition. And we, here and there, we've been out in the world, and our traditions morph based on the communities that we live in and the societies we live in. And when we return, as we're in this moment of returning to a feminine consciousness, we're also returning to the body, and this is a big part of the Torah that I talk about a lot. So what I was reading before from Sarah Hudit, she says here, so Miriam, when she brought in this powerful light, this light of essence and source, this required the participation of the entire body because these circle lights are so bright, they don't fit into the space of brain and mind. Circle awareness is so fast, it takes an entire body to hold it. Each cell must participate in the effort and share the load. The final knowing is a visceral experience where awareness permeates every limb and organ in the body. And just take a minute to breathe and feel that. What is that feeling that you get sometimes? I get it on Fridays after I light my Shabbat candles. When you feel down to the edge of your toenails, down to the edge of your hair, that every part of my bone, kol atzmatai tamarna, speaking God and feeling God. That's what we're working towards, people. When we can walk through the street and feel just as energized and activated with divine energy when I'm walking through the street and elbowing someone on the subway and in line for my Starbucks, as I feel when I'm in my house and praying on my mat, then we've achieved that. Then we've been able to step into a moment where our bodies are holding this divine power. And when Miriam and the women sang this song in the present moment, now is the redemption, now is the circle consciousness, now is the time for the feminine, now is the time for the water, now is the time for the circle. They were saying we can only do that if we use our bodies, if we put our whole, put your back into it, as the song says. And we have to do that now. And I think that's why we're here at home, because we're practicing. We're literally been told, sit down and do a meditation retreat where you learn how to be God conscious. Because if I can't be God conscious in my kitchen when I'm preparing my food, or in my living room when I'm doing my work, can I be God conscious when I'm walking out in the street and I'm having an argument because this guy cut me off? Like, that's not walking in God consciousness. That's not allowing every cell in my body to be God. That's not bringing in a circle world. And I've been living that way for a long time, and we've all been living that way for a long time. And now Mama Nature gave us a call and said, go to your room and think about what you need to do. And what you need to do is cross the sea. You need to get out of your constrictions. You need to get out of your boundaries. You need to get out of your Mitzrayims. You need to stop commuting every day, and you need to stop doing the work that is just, automated and static and masculine nature. And you need to start thinking about, how can I live in a world that is circular, and in a world that is water, communication, collaboration, neighbors, sharing, gifting, taking care of each other? How can I live in a world where instead of looking up to the political structures to save me through the hierarchy, I can actually look in the circular structures that I build on the ground to create something better? Now, I'm not an ecofeminist theoretician specialist. I don't specialize in organizational theory. I studied in college for a little bit. But this is the work that I'm doing in my research right now, is to really understand some of these systems, because they're already out there. And we are so blessed to have access to the traditions of 200 years ago, 250 years ago, of rabbis who wrote about this, and from 1,000, 2,000 years ago of rabbis who wrote about this, and now of women teachers and queer people who are writing about this and saying, yeah, we're ready to build a better world. We are building a better world. And we see that the work being done in ecofeminist communities and in organizational theory and in improved public health systems, that all of those things are coming, and improved education systems are all coming together to create this world that we've been talking about. All the work being done in somatic healing and embodied practices and conscious dance, which has been a huge part of my healing journey, and all kinds of embodied hands-on healing experiences. Jen, I don't know if Jen is still on here, but I know Jen practices somatic healing, and the idea that the body holds on to trauma and that we can actually transmute it in the body is such a game-changing shift from, I need to sit through therapy and talk it out, and then by talking it through, I'll be able to get rid of it. No, we can actually get rid of it in our bodies. We can bring the Messianic era. We can bring about full redemption by getting into our bodies like these women did, getting into our bodies, getting into a circle and dancing being a prayer. Everyone has different ways of praying, but like Sarah, we were talking about before, I dance as a prayer. So I've been sharing these on and off the last couple of weeks, where in the afternoon, as part of my mincha practice, I'll put on a bunch of different music that is actually related to the liturgy. So I'm still working with the traditional parameters of the Jewish liturgy for tefillah, for prayer, but I'm using it to dance. And I just put the music on and I dance and sing along, take a few moments of silent meditation, then continue to dance, because that for me is a way of living the prayer, of activating every cell to draw it in. And it's an incredible thing that we have all of these tools. We've been laying the groundwork for this for so long. There are networks in place. There's technology in place. There is the theory in place. There's philosophy in place. And all that's left is for each and every one of us to grab the hand of the person next to us and pull them into the circle and say, let's dance. Let's dance. And it can be really hard. It can be really hard right now because we're also grieving. And I spent a lot of time this week grieving. I want to dedicate this this teaching to the memory of Shlomo ben Moshe, a dear friend Shlomi. And there's more of this coming, and it's, we have financial worries. We have all kinds of concerns that are real. And yet at the same time, even if we have tears coming down our face, even if our hearts are broken, we still need to get up off the floor and dance our hearts out. Dance from the heart, dance from the gut, dance from the kishkas. Let that dance be an expression of the world that we are creating. It's not the world that we want to create. It's the world that we are literally creating with every move, with every step. This is what Miriam saw. Miriam was the prophetess, Miriam Hanaviah. Miriam was the one who represented the water that rises from below. We keep saying, oh God, when's God going to save us? We're like waiting for rains. No. Dig deep. Dig into the hole. Find the muck. Find the mud. Find the dirt. Find the traumas that we're excavating. And the deeper we get, let the waters rush out. And that water will help us rise. We'll be deep in the pit and then we rise from the water. Allow that process to happen, because that's the process that's taking place right now. And shake it off. Yes, Sarah, scream, shake, express it through the body, because we're in that process now. People getting physically sick is processing all that information. It's Pesach now. Pesach is about eating matzah. Matzah is the food of healing and the food of faith. It is the only positive mitzvah in the Torah to do with eating. We have a lot of other commandments to do with eating in Jewish tradition, but they're to do with what you don't eat, not to do with what you do eat. The moment that we eat the matzah throughout these 7 days, and especially on the nights of the Seder, we are able to take something into our body, and it's alchemy. It's a prayer for our health. It's a prayer for our healing. It's a prayer for our faith. And we're moving into that moment, because tomorrow night, as we hit the 7-day Pesach, we're getting out. We're not just getting out, but we're going into the wilderness. We're going into a place where we're going to be asked to see what we're made of. I think, my experience from Burning Man, I remember a couple of years ago coming back from Burning Man and being like, my people have spent enough time in the desert, But I know that there's that experience when you're like, I have to get through this. I have to walk this walk. I have to walk this path. I have to move forward. I have to get food and I have to get water. And it's interesting because actually this is another Hasidic teaching from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, that the gifts that it says in the Talmud that the Israelites received different gifts in the desert. They received the manna, which came from heaven. It was the food that came from heaven. They received the clouds of glory, which was their sort of shade, protection, and their guidance. So it sort of protected them on every area from the elements. And so there was like food and shelter, and the water. And they received the water, the well of Miriam. And the two other, all of those aspects are related to water, because the cloud is obviously like, condensation. And the manna, which came down from the earth, was said to appear like dew, or tal, as we prayed for this week. So they both had like different connotations to do with water, but they both came from above. They were a masculine way of giving that was coming from above to below, God bestowing. Like I said, like we talked earlier, this hierarchical shefa, like mashpia makabel. But then we have the well of Miriam. And the well of Miriam, it says in the Midrash, was like a rock that would sort of move around from place to place. And everyone would when it would get to wherever they would set up camp, it would be the central like water cooler place, and all the different heads of the different tribes would go, and they would go up to this rock, and they would get a whole stream and bring it to people, and it was very abundant and there was water everywhere, and that was the water that flowed from within the earth. That was the water that is so precious and so powerful in a desert, and it's so powerful for us right now, because we're going into a new way of living where we're not going to have our Amazon deliveries that come within 24 hours straight away, or we're not going to necessarily be able to have all the things that we're used to getting, maybe not a steady these financial benefits from big corporations that some of us are used to. We have to dig deep. We have to dig our holes and let the water flow, and say Ale Be'er. In the Torah, it talks about how that's what they would say. Ale Be'er, rise well, rise. And they sang this song of the Be'er, and there's a song right now that I love. And Bluth, I don't know if you're still here, but there's a song, Ale Ruchi, rise spirit, Ale Ruchi, Ale Nafshi, Ale Ali, Ale Ruchi, Ale Nafshi, Ale Ale Ruchi, Ale Nafshi, Ale Ali. Like, rise my spirit, rise my soul, rise, rise. That's what we're doing now. The Shekhinah is rising. The feminine is rising. It's not about what gender you are. It's, can I access that energy? Can I access that power? Can I access that ability to honor and respect the parts of society that have been not looked after, from our postal service to our healthcare workers to the people who, Con Ed, like right now, there's a lot of people without power in New York. So, the Con Ed workers, I bless them. All of these people, can we recognize that rising feminine energy, and can we move ourselves into a non-hierarchy where I say, you know what, this person might clean houses for a living. This person might collect garbage for a living. This person might make egg and cheese at the bodega for a living. And this person might make millions of dollars on Wall Street, and this person might organize really large-scale conferences, and this person might be a lawyer, and none is more important than the other. None is more essential than the other. The person with the Ivy League degrees and the graduate degrees and the fancy cars, and the person who takes the subway and mops the floors, we each have something to learn from each other. We can move into a world where, I'm not saying like from a gendered standpoint that what was once women's work is more important than what was once men's work. But I'm saying that if you are engaged in work like that, we need to see it as valuable. We need to recognize that which people have been engaged in for so long need to be valued and seen as just as important, and not say, oh, well, that person's just the janitor, that person's just this, that. No, or if a woman is attracted to doing a profession that has traditionally been feminine, and people say, oh, you could do better than that, move into something that was traditionally masculine, she doesn't need to do that. This is just as powerful. And I actually think, I know I'm going on for so long, I'm gonna have to stop in a minute, but I think this is the same when it comes to our religious practice. I think that we often looked at certain masculine practices of like text study that's done in the head as the holiest, the most important, the most powerful way of connecting to God, because that's what our, how our communities were set up. And then there were women, medicine women and priestesses, and women who passed on oral traditions to each other, and women who took care of the children at home and who communicated to one another as in a sisterhood. And all of their spiritual practices are just as important. And when we move into a more gender equitable way of looking at things, it's not just about saying, okay, women, now you can also study sacred texts and you can also take part in rituals. But it's about saying, everybody, no matter what gender you are, can we tap into that ancient, mystical, deep, feminine spiritual practice of baking bread or building a home or having a meal in a home. And what's really interesting right now, hopefully will be my last point, is that we're moving into that. Judaism, we're seeing now a democratization of Jewish spiritual practice. For so long, it was, you have to go to a synagogue, you have to have a rabbi officiate for you, you have to have this formal structure of your Judaism in order to that this is how you connect, this is how you get things done. And we're moving into a place where it's like, actually, I can do my Seder at home and run my Seder myself. And I did the Seder companion, and that is just as powerful. In fact, that's how it's meant to be. I can have Shabbat at home with my family, light the candles, sing the songs, And instead of seeing everything as it has to be outward, I have to be a hunter, we can actually step back into being a gatherer. And of course, the goal is eventually to move into a space where one is not more important than the other. Like I said, the relationship is one of circularity. The relationship is one of non-hierarchy. So I want to bless us all, because in about 12 or 15 hours from now in Jerusalem, we're going to be moving into the 7th night of Pesach, and we're going to be getting ready to cross that sea. And when we cross that sea, we're going to want to dance, and we're going to move into a moment where we're going to taste the world to come. We're going to taste what is possible in the world that we're building. We've all been feeling really out of sorts. We're dealing with grief. We're dealing with old traumas. We're dealing with old fear, anxiety. And we're also in a container of transformation, a chrysalis, a caterpillar moment that is unparalleled in our society's history. Honestly, that's what I'm hearing from a lot of teachers. And we can use that to transform and transmute and say, hey, I'm going to cross that sea. I'm going to take that jump. And when I get to the other end, and now I'm in this new world, we're building it together. Can I grab everybody's hands? Can I sing? Can I let the water guide me? Can I sing to God, Shiru Lashem, gratitude, body, dance, movement, song? And can I really, with my community, with my family, with my household, build this world, this new consciousness that is growing, that is alive, that is so present in the world right now? That's where we're at. And I pray that we can do it with smoothness and with ease and with beauty. And that those who are passing can be advocates for us and help us move this and persist in shifting this and making the shape. And that those who are sick can breathe easy and come back to us in a good way. And those who are transitioning, who are supposed to be transitioning, should transition with smoothness and ease. And everyone should be healthy and well and abundant. And all of the challenges we're experiencing through this shift should become smooth. Just like it says the Israelites crossed through the Red Sea on dry land. That when we make this crossing, that it's smooth, that it's cool. It says that it was like cool, dry earth. And then when the Egyptians went through, it was like hot and muddy. It should be cool and dry. The Midrash says that there was fruit on the side of the walls. We should pick off the fruit. We should be able to walk in shade and in beauty and protection, because we're all doing this together now. We're all on this journey. And I want to thank you so much for being with me on this journey tonight. I know that there's a lot of people here who I don't know, because if I knew you, then I would see who you are, but I don't see who you are, which means that you're new. So I'm going to tell you some logistical housekeeping, is that you're on a page called the Gene-Sis. So click like and then click see first. And when you do that, you'll see that every day I post a new meditation of the Spirit HaOmer, which is the journey that we're on. So we crossed the sea and we're moving into this, we're in this 49-day trek across the wilderness till we get to Revelation. So I invite you to follow me on Instagram or Facebook to see that and move into this process together. And so many beautiful blessings from all of you. Sarah, our isolation should be one of unity and oneness. Yes. In fact, there was something really beautiful I was reading before about, the separation being spread across the lands. And in the prayer, in Musaf of the holiday, we say, V'kara pizarena min hagoyim. May God bring together all of the spread out from among the people. And may all of us who are in this moment of being spread out use this moment for one of connecting to oneness, connecting to the divine, and being able to grow in our connections to each other. Because we have more time than we've ever had before. I'm speaking to people on the phone more than I've ever spoken before. So I hope we can really use this time, this chrysalis, to really, really build what we're trying to build and move into this amazing new world. So I don't know if we want to do a little dance now. I'm feeling like it might be the time. So we're going to play a classic, which is from Debbie Friedman. We're going to play Miriam's song. I love that Baruch is sharing Prince of Egypt. Of course, I'm obsessed with Prince of Egypt, and I saw it recently on West End and bawled my eyes out within the first second. The minute it was like, deliver us, I'm falling apart, just feeling like this is us, this is who we are, this is our life. But there can be miracles when you believe. And it is $3.99 now on Amazon to download the whole movie, A Prince of Egypt. So if you're like me and you rent it every year for $2.99, you could just buy it for $3.99 and then you'll have it forever. So highly recommend. Anyway, those of you who want to stick with me for another couple of minutes, let's see if I can move this room. And we're going to do a little dance. This is Debbie Friedman. Follow Miriam, she sang a song, sing a song. Miriam and the women come. This tapestry she wove was one of her Miriam. Every thread and every strand she crafted her delight. A woman touched with spirit, she dances toward the light. Women dancing with their timbrels. Follow Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one who we've exalted. Miriam and the women dance and dance all night long. And gazed across the sea, the wonder of this miracle she certainly to believe. Whoever thought the sea was part with an outstretched hand, and we would pass the freedom and march to the promised land. Follow women dancing with their timbrels. Follow Miriam as she sang her song. Sing a song to the one who we've exalted. Miriam and the women danced and danced all night long. That was Debbie Friedman with Miriam's dance. I may have just woken up my roommate, so I apologize. I've never had this many people on a Facebook Live before, and I feel like I should take advantage of it while you're all here. Let's just see if we can get one more good song going before we shut down. Because now we talked about dancing, we should figure out how to actually do it. I actually usually do this as like a full every year at Isabella Freeman, where I teach on Pesach, I do like a full Miriam's dance journey, and we've done it the last 2 years, and I'll share you all the playlist, but we can't do it today. I mean, we're not there, so let's see. All right. Every time I feel this way, this old familiar saying, King, I will lay my troubles down by the water, where the river will never run dry. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let myself be lifted. I'm gonna let myself be lifted. I'm gonna let myself be lifted. By and by I will lay my troubles down by the water, where the river will never run dry. It's been said and I do believe. Sarah Klein, you want to do a dance for the Sphira? Eliza Rivka, who I'll tag, she's on here. She's been doing dance prompts for Sphira Omer. Bring me sweet release, where the river will never run dry. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let myself feel. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let myself feel. Hallelujah. I'm gonna let myself feel. I will lay my troubles down by the water, where the river will never run dry. Where the river will never run dry. So blessings to all in this chesed week of flowing with the rivers, flowing with the waters, circling in your dance. Please feel free to share with me. Yes, this is my muse. It's Hallelujah by my muse. Thank you all for being here. So beautiful to see so many sweet faces. And feel free to send me a message on how you create circular consciousness and embodied dance prayer in your life. Lots of love. Chag Sameach. And may we all get out of Egypt ASAP, if not right now. Amen.